My name is Winston Thomas, and I'm the editor-in-chief at CDOTrends. We are now at the second panel for the day, and we are going back to the future with a topic about hybrid cloud. The topic itself is a question, which is a problem statement. Is hybrid cloud a compromise or a competitive enhancer? I'm sure it's a question that everybody had gone through in their minds over the past 1.5 years. I won't be alone. To join us, we have, first of all, Mohan Ayasamy, General Manager at Technology Enterprise Systems at Tabcorp Holdings, which is a listed gaming company. He has also worked with the Department of Defense, Toll Group, and Optus. We have also Keir Morrison, GM IT Technology Operations at John Holland Group, which is a leading engineering contractor in Australia. He comes with a lot of DevOps and automation experience, having worked with Deloitte and Helix in those areas. Lastly, we have William Lim, APAC Technology Program Director for Equinix, which is a co-location and interconnection leader whom you have heard just before. He will give us a solution to provide a perspective to most of our questions. Before we begin, let's start with some definitions. What is a hybrid cloud in my context? It is on-premises, private cloud, and public cloud put meshed together. Later on, if we have time, we might touch on the subject of hybrid multi-cloud. And in this case, we are also extending the definition to multiple public clouds as well as hyperscaler solutions. As my colleague has talked about earlier, please feel free to use this session to ask your questions. Use the Q&A button, and I will pick up the questions as we go. And if those questions are not answered, I'm sure my panelists will also answer them offline. So maybe let's start with this discussion with a quick question to Keir. For a long time, hybrid cloud has been seen as a compromise for those who want cloud native flexibility but held back by legacy requirements. And that's just one point of view. Is this true now, especially with analysts reporting hybrid cloud deployments are increasing?
Yeah, thanks, Winston. Look, I don't believe it still is the case now. There definitely used to be an us and them type scenario in the past where you had those who'd onboarded into public clouds and those that were either still in a private cloud environment or perhaps dipping their feet into the public cloud space. You know, with many of the advancements that we've seen across some orchestration type tooling, Ansible and those sorts of products, the management plane across those two environments has been simplified enormously. So I don't think we see that divide these days. I certainly think there is a choice for greater choices for business to be either all in on a public cloud or construct that private cloud environment or a hybrid cloud environment without the overheads that we previously saw in the past. You know, of course, there's still the needs to potentially procure equipment, rack and stack and all that sort of stuff too into a private cloud type space if that's the arrangement you have, which differs from a public cloud and the agility associated with just enabling the services as you need them. But certainly the ability to manage and orchestrate and have a consistent environment between those two locations has improved greatly over the years, and hence we see that divide shrinking.
Thanks, Keir. You mentioned earlier on in our discussion, in our private discussion, in terms of your company looking at hybrid being a cloud native player themselves. What are the motivations?
Yeah, look, we jumped all into a public cloud environment a couple of years ago, and we've been through the very typical journey where we have initially taken our data centers and unceremoniously put them into a public cloud environment, and they certainly weren't cloud native. Over the last 18 months, we've certainly enabled a much more cloud native approach where we've advanced significantly. In the next 18 months will be quite an amazing journey that we're going on in that space. So for us, hybrid, our private data centers, we still hold a couple of data centers, but they have very, very small amounts of equipment. Largely, we're talking networking type environments in play. And for us, we're still in the future, we're looking to roll away from that as well. So for hybrid, for us, we take another approach where we start looking at edge compute and how we're going to service IoT, computer vision, and those low latency type applications, as opposed to servicing business applications, data applications, etc., from a hybrid type environment.
Thanks, Kia. And we'll go into the edge perspective. I'd like to bring in Mohan. Mohan, what's your perspective on how you see hybrid cloud?
I tend to agree with Kia in the sense that it's not us versus them or this versus that. It depends on the type of organization you are and where you are in the journey and what your competition is like and what are the main reasons. I think one thing I would like to emphasize is that before you embark on any cloud journey, public, private, hybrid, whatever, I think it's important to know why you're doing that. I know several players who just somehow thought that cloud is cheap. And then after some time, you figure out it's actually not as cheap as you thought it was, get some bill shocks, and you get concerned. And there are people who might have just thought cloud is by inherently agile, unless it may not be the case if you don't manage it properly. So the way I look at it is that you should look at it holistically, right? You have to look at the organization you are in, the applications you're having, and the operating model. There are organizations that have got a specific operating model. And if you're choosing to go to a cloud native type model, like Kerr was saying for John Holland, then the operating model of the internal IT organization has to change. If you do not change your IT operating model or the internal funding model or how the CFO views the CapEx versus OpEx type scenarios, suddenly for IT to make a decision and then from tomorrow I'm going to shift all my data centers and put it in the public cloud may come with a lot of shock that may be disproportionate to any benefit that you may think you get out of agility and so on. So if you take the two organizations you mentioned I worked in, if you take defense. So defense, the decision to go cloud native is just not based on the nature of the business or the agility or anything. It is sometimes driven by the national security implications. Like it cannot, for so many reasons, national security, you just cannot just jump in and go into your public cloud. And if you take an organization like Tabcorp, I think we will always be in a hybrid situation. We'll still have our own data centers. And this is not driven mainly because of any other reason, because based on the mix of applications we have got, and also some of the regulatory pressures we have got. Just like defense has got national security considerations, companies like Tabcorp have got a lot of regulatory, demands. So based on that, I think we'd certainly stay hybrid. And there are certain pockets which I think inherently does very well for us to go to the cloud. For example, we have done personalized marketing campaigns to our customers using data. That I think is absolutely well thought of, and it fundamentally suits the cloud. We wanted to have a product and a customer experience that need to be functional, responding to, especially with the COVID situation last year, responding to an omni-channel type requirements for the customers. Of course, yes, cloud makes it absolutely sensible to go there. So in a sense, to summarize my response to your question, it's horses for courses. Depends on the organization, depends on the application landscape you've got, and also look at your operating model, funding model, your regulatory and security requirements. All of that should make a call as to whether you will go fully cloud native or not.
Okay, thanks, Mohan. And before we get into the technical aspect, I just wanted to get one question out of the way. In terms of economics, and Mohan, you mentioned that, going from an CapEx to an OpEx model, that was the general argument for moving on-premises to hybrid. In fact, that's one of the biggest reasons why people were asked earlier on to move to cloud native. Has that model changed, that perspective? Is that really matters to a CFO in this time and date?
Asking the question to me first, or Kerr? If it is to me, I would say yes, there are CFOs who still have a particular model. So they still like capitalization and so on. So I think it does not change. The overall belief that somehow OpEx is better than CapEx or CapEx is better than OpEx has changed. Definitely, I think that's not the issue. But I think we still have to understand the total cost of ownership. I think I'll go back to whether you're doing it on data centers or in cloud, because a CFO may think that you will get $1 million a month bill based on the cloud, and then suddenly he or she gets to see $1.3 million a month. And that is a shock. I think for me, it's not, yeah, OPEX, CAPEX will still be there in the minds of certain CFOs. I don't think that will go away. But more importantly, the understanding of the cost model of the cloud and somehow assuming that you'll get a cheaper bill just because going to the cloud, I think is a far more significant issue than the financial treatment, whether it is OPEX or CAPEX.
Thanks, Mohan. I'll go to Kia. Kia, same question, but do you see bill shocks? One of the reasons why people might be even thinking of moving even on premises nowadays from hybrid or even cloud native?
Look, I think bill shock comes round from somewhat of a level of inexperience. So in the cloud environment, and you can quickly get yourself in trouble in a cloud environment because effectively you have unlimited resources. So one of the key areas, we talk about governance around security, and you've got to have governance around your cost modelling as well. Who's able to spin environments up? What environments can they spin up? How long can they spin those up for? All those sorts of controls. So and I think the equation around cost is you've got to go into this expecting that potentially it's not going to be any cheaper financially, but where we start to measure our cost is around our effectiveness and our agility and our ability to experiment and deliver projects into the business quicker, as well as sort of start democratizing that technology space as well. So once we build the frameworks, once we build the controls, we're handing over to our data team, for example, who are able to build their own environments, their own queries. Our application teams do the same. So it's a great model where IT gets out of the way and we give them the tools to do that, where I don't think we necessarily see that in that hybrid space. But these are the sort of equations that we bring on board when we start talking about the cost benefits of cloud, and you simply can't say it's going to be cheaper.
Thanks. William, I'd like to bring you into the discussion. And in terms of trends that, especially where you are sitting, where you can see how hybrid cloud is moving across the entire region, what are the key trends that is pushing this hybrid cloud particular deployment at the moment?
Sure. Thanks, Winston. Now, before I jump into answering this question, I'd probably like to add on one more comment on the cost element itself. So I think one of the often neglected topic around cost is the future cost of change. Because a lot of times when companies are deciding which cloud to go on, which cloud framework to adopt, they usually consider it between just on-premise and one particular public cloud. And as and when the other public clouds somehow are able to launch much better and much more innovative solutions, that is when companies are caught off guard in the future state and realizing that the cost of change, if not yet pre-planned in a strategic manner itself, that cost of change would change the entire ballgame altogether. So I think that future cost of change is the fundamental reasons why hybrid cloud is the right way forward in a very future-proof manner for enterprises. So coming back to the question you asked with regards to trend. So I believe different companies are at different stages of maturity. So definitely more and more of them are more inclined to now fully embrace the fact that the future state of their workloads is based on a multi-source technology framework. So it's like a Lego building blocks where you have the flexibility to swap out certain blocks to be replaced with the new ones or the better ones or the more suitable ones. So it is that agility framework itself that is now bringing the overall maturity to, I'm not choosing either one or the other. I'm always consistently evaluating what are the best parts out there that I can bring in to swap out the ones that are not performing as well or probably just not working at all. So I think the trend is how they are embracing the best of from private cloud. They are talking about, I still have control. I can observe my compliance. And at the same time, I have my full choice of which public cloud, not just restricted to IaaS, but potentially from SaaS and PaaS as well. So I call it the 3 C's of the private cloud world: control, compliance, and choice, and marry it together with the benefits of not just one, but all of the public clouds who consistently provide the speed, the scale, and the services. And we are talking about services not just launched by the hyperscalers themselves, but also their marketplace, with so many ISVs launching and introducing very fantastic solutions on a regular basis. So we do see the trend, especially at Equinix, many companies that comes from traditional on-prem going to public cloud, and companies which are born in the public cloud now going into the multi-public cloud and figuring what is the best way to navigate around multi-public cloud. So I believe hybrid cloud is definitely the right way forward, which provides the best of all worlds to the enterprises and companies out there.
Okay, thanks, William. I'll come to your point in terms of the hybrid multi-cloud. Kia, I just wanted to ask, when it comes to what you call the people that is managing a hybrid cloud, and especially when it comes to cloud native development, for instance, DevOps, they have to think about IOC and other issues when you're actually creating containerized applications. And that kind of mindset and that kind of knowledge is still quite new out there. Do you have challenges when it comes to having a hybrid cloud as one of your underlying infrastructure?
Look, the engineers, the traditional engineers that looked after a true on-prem DC type environment, I think are very different to your DevOps cloud-focused engineers today. Do we have trouble getting talent? I think everyone has trouble getting talent these days. You know, it's a massive issue for us. But I think we've also got to be in a position where we've got to be wanting to really retain the talent that we do have. And if we are asking them to, and this goes back to my earlier point about if we're asking them to manage a hybrid environment as well as a cloud environment, we've got to make that as consistent as possible for them. So we take a lot of time in looking at that orchestration framework, how our networks interact between what's in a hybrid state versus what's in a cloud state, for example. So we've got that total picture across what our engineers are in fact dealing with, and I think that's really quite important. We spend a lot of time upskilling, and I think, you know, for where we sit in John Holland, we've got some really talented senior engineers there, and we're bringing a lot of junior engineers up, but we're training them in a more modern type approach where they're not going into an environment where it's a GUI based environment that you're building out your public cloud environment. They're building these things from the ground up. So it's infrastructure as code, but that code transverses across both cloud and any on-prem environments we have. So, you know, we're trying to tackle that dual state and ensuring that we don't let that hybrid state drag us too far in a direction that takes our interest away from our cloud space.
Okay. Mohan, same questions in terms of talent. How do you actually handle it?
I think Kia pretty much summarized it. Talent is a challenge for all of us, there's no doubt. But I think the point you raised about the workforce is very pertinent, because I think we all have a hybrid workforce too. It's not just hybrid cloud, but it's a hybrid workforce too, because there are still people who are traditional, who have managed internal data centers, procured infrastructure, managed and maintained them very close to their heart. And then we've got a sort of, you want to call it a newish workforce, which wants to get and develop products quickly, and they're more used to this. So I think it's not only the workforce directly related to infrastructure, but I think holistically, I think our integration, workforce and talent around thinking around integration, architecture, identity and access management, all of them have to change. If the organization is embarking, doesn't matter if it's purely cloud native or a hybrid cloud, which I think is inevitable these days. I think the workforce needs to be retrained on thinking about it right from the beginning, from a strategy point of view, architecture point of view, integration, security, all of them put together, not just the infrastructure. So completely agree that we need to have a look at retraining and balancing the skills we have got internally. But we all face the same challenge, particularly after COVID, with restrictions on, overseas resources coming. It's going to be a challenge, and I think it'll continue to be a challenge to retain and attract to attract and retain the right kind of workforce.
Thanks. And William, I just want to know from a solution providers as well as an enabler point of view, how are you actually working with companies to actually address this talent gap?
Sure. So I think education and enablement is definitely one of the foundational steps towards achieving that. So over the years, as Equinix team is engaging both customers and partners on the ground, we have picked up that there's a general misconception when it comes to the concept of hybrid cloud. So of course, yes, it's combination of on-premise private cloud plus the multiple public clouds. So many fall into this category of understanding that it's just a binary option. It's either on-prem or all the way to public cloud. So many are not aware that there's a middle ground that actually celebrates all kinds of infrastructure and all kinds of digital platform moving forward. So that is the kind of off-premise interconnected digital platform. So what Equinix offers is really not just a location for your private cloud to be powered and to be modernized into, but it also has a suite of very dense and very rich ecosystem of service providers living physically right at the same data center itself. So when we talk about hybrid cloud, many sometimes just focus all their time also into the second misconception is about finding the best building blocks on each side of the camp. But the true measurement of hybrid cloud and how well they work together in a very interdependent model is actually underpinned by how well all these components are connected and where they're connected at. Because again, we are talking about the final workload performance. We are talking about the eventual customer experience. So what is really important is, like what Mohan mentioned, start off from the right step, have that strategic overview, and be able to execute them in a very agile manner. Just like the building blocks I mentioned early on, be ready to swap in and swap out each part as and when the new ones and the more impactful ones make themselves available to your company and to your business objectives. So from Equinix, what we truly want to work on is to have not just the customers to be fully onboarded and fully aware of all these alternatives. We're also working closely with the different technology vendors as well as the delivery partners to really navigate the best way forward, not just one over the other, but what works best for the company's interests.
William, just a quick one. Why are there misconceptions in this day and age? I mean, is it because there is still not a clear understanding of what hybrid cloud is about? And you mentioned the binary option.
Yeah, I think that definitely is mainly due to the different marketing pitches, messages, and campaigns by all parties involved. So you'll find this is being made worse by how some of the hardware vendors are desperately trying to retain the workloads on-prem, while the hyperscalers are always advocating for everything works better on the public cloud. So you'll find that there is really a lack of the common ground and lack of enablers. So which is why I think Platform Equinix, as a company and as a platform, we have been building a very rich ecosystems and really want to make sure that all these messages are being spread and evangelized in a very efficient manner to let everyone know that why would you choose to only hide in one corner in a very rich playground? Why not you retain and always maintain that flexibility to be able to choose the best ones available on the platform? So I think this has definitely got to do with the way that the different vendors, especially the giants, are sending the messages to the market. So we are definitely working very closely with all our alliances and our partners to make sure that the right way forward, the hybrid multi-cloud, is the way to go.
Here, just wanted to bring you here. You mentioned earlier on about edge computing and IoT. I'm just wondering, first of all, what were your motivations, and are you facing a barrage of competing marketing messages that just makes the whole messaging a bit more blurry?
Yeah, look, I think to come back to the marketing messages first, I think the message around data rehydration, those sort of messages that come through, there's a lot of that messaging around. I don't think that's a really relevant use case or even overly factual. You know, I read a Gartner article a little while ago that sort of says 88% of people in sort of my position haven't even thought about this sort of stuff. So and I think if you're having bottlenecks, you really need to start looking at the entire landscape. So look at your networks, look at what your users are performing, your database structure, all that sort of stuff, because, you know, we can tune things in the cloud and we can make those adaptive. Our journey to Edge is much around supporting a digital transformation initiative we have underway. We have a huge amount of IoT type interest, computer vision growth, those sort of concepts in the business. And there's really two parts to those sort of systems. One is that they have a data push where we're looking for data, we're analysing that data in the future, for example, right? And then we have a need to take that data in and make instant decisions, right? Particularly around computer vision. Health and safety is extremely important to John Holland. Obviously, we've got our workforce in some risky situations in terms of the work that they would do. So we want to make them as safe as we possibly can. And this is where computer vision can come into that space. So we've got to have no latency whatsoever. So, if we're detecting someone moves into a particular space they shouldn't be in, we want to put alarms out. We want people to stop what they're doing. So we can't have any network latency around that. And that's why we're looking for that edge push more so.
Okay. Does that mean that you have to re-architect your infrastructure to enable this? I mean, over time, I could see the edges becoming much more heavier rather than the center.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and I think for us, the biggest architecture change is our WAN, and that's where we're having to make that change. Certainly, we've focused on being able to manage that compute layer at the edge, again, going back to the orchestration. So we've taken a very focused view on that. We're not looking to create headaches or anything getting out of date in terms of patching, etc. But the network is probably our biggest architectural change that we're having to make to support these sort of environments. We're investing heavily with 5G and experimenting in those areas, but certainly around our network is where we want to reduce that latency.
Thanks. Mohan, in terms of edge computing means very different things in defense, especially when you have an entire warship which might be processing data much more bigger than some of the data centers that we have around the world. So I'm just wondering, how do they approach edge computing?
Very interesting, because the modern, the modern warfighting type, whether it is jet fighters or ships you get, they're almost floating or flying data centers in their own rights. So an F-35, I think, gathers about 16 terabytes of data every time it flies somewhere. So the important thing here is decision making. Why do you need to? Because everybody has sensors or there in every corner of the aircraft. Or I think somebody mentions that a ship is nothing but a piece of equipment to keep the sensors dry, or some such statements were made in defense. So lots and lots of sensors and collecting data. The important thing is, why do you need them? And what kind of decisions you make. So if you take this example of a jet fighter or an aircraft flying, or a reconnaissance aircraft flying, collecting lots of information, you have to make certain decisions on the spot. You cannot afford to take a hard drive and then fly it over, hundreds of kilometers, put it on a data center, and then analyze it, and then 2 days later come back and make a decision. So the trend, as far as I was in defense, was more to see you have almost like mini data centers, or data centers in a suitcase or a box or whatever you call it, apart from aircrafts and all becoming data centers themselves. So it depends on what kind of computing, what kind of workload you want to put on them versus what can be taken away. Because if you put all the computing workload on the edge and the aircrafts and all, that just makes it impossible. So I think some of the things that are being undertaken in that space is pretty much, pattern detection. I think, John, you mentioned about detecting somebody if they intrude into the buildings or something, similar kind of things. If you see, blue sky, blue sky, blue sky, and then there is a blip, and then there's blue sky, blue sky, and there is a blip. It is the blips that are important than the blue skies. And so how do you actually track the blue skies, and how quickly you want to do that? So in the way I don't think those kinds of scenarios tend themselves to a cloud-based environment where you may have to have internet or Wi-Fi connection. It may not be even possible. In certain geographies, in certain deployed positions, it may not even be possible, let alone having a good, even if it's a good idea, it may not be possible. So I think that in scenarios like defense, you'll certainly see, if you want to use the term, mini data centers, but as long as we use it very efficiently, and if you put some thoughts into what kind of computing we need them to perform, how much data you really want to store there versus what can be safely taken away for future analysis at a different point of time, I think it'll be there. I don't foresee that being taken to the cloud at all.
Okay, but in terms of joint exercises, you might still need to do hybrid cloud kind of environments, right?
Yes, depends on what data you want to get from the cloud and what data you want to get locally. Joint or amphibious warfighting is quite an interesting exercise where you need to get, reconnaissance data, intelligence data, cybersecurity data, people data, and everything. So it depends on the fusion of data and where you get this from. So I don't have a ready-made answer for that. But to your point, I think hybrid hybrid cloud or hybrid computing is the only way I think organizations like defense can go. I don't think we can become totally cloud native and put everything on a public cloud or completely on a private cloud, because the type of data will determine and who gets access on the geographies. It's actually a 3-point thing. It's the type of devices you carry, the people who carry these devices, and the geographies in which you operate. All the three of them will come together before you can make a decision, because in certain geographies you may not be able to connect to the public network of that particular geography and then do anything, even though a cloud could be the right answer to that particular solution. So in which case, we'll have to carry, like many data centers in briefcase, suitcases, or containers, or whatever you call it, and then use that kind of computing.
Okay, William, you have a quick jab at this question?
Yeah, sure. So I think when it comes to the strategy, again, at the initial phase, I think companies have to consider there are two parts to this execution itself. So one part is intra-company. How do I make the best decision when it comes to my company objective and my outcome, and also the customer experience itself? So that intra part, I think most of the companies are already quite aware what are the best practices. So the second part of it, which is again often neglected because as of today is not really that widespread or not really that generally available. So the second part of it is looking at it from a collaborative ecosystem point of view. So you may have the best edge computing, you may have the best fleet of IoT controllers itself, but the fact remains that if that entire system within your company is required to collaborate with other companies, you then have to figure out, do I communicate from those sensors, from those gateways to the other companies? At that age itself, would that work? Even if you are able to do so, even if you're ready to do so, the rest of the participants in the ecosystems may not yet be. So you can see that even when it comes to the age itself, a lot of times when it comes to actual data exchange, application exchange within the ecosystem, a lot of companies still have to consider, how do I then have that very complete streaming from all the way to the edge or from the cloud back to the core, where most companies are still more comfortable in exchanging information in that direct, probably what we call a cross-connect or data center to data center connectivity itself. So I think these two parts definitely have to be taken into consideration when we are launching the edge and the IoT strategy. Thanks.
Thanks, William. I think you brought up a good point here. Do you see companies still more comfortable sharing from central to central instead of using an edge model to share some of their data across companies?
Yeah, look, I think there's been significant improvements in the way that we manage our data. Obviously, it's still a very attack-driven environment, if you like, but we've seen enough improvements that those comfort levels are definitely changing, right? And the way that data sharing occurs is not a singular decision. Like there's no best practice, right? We've got to actually design the right approach for the business to be able to share its data in the way that it needs to share its data.
Okay, thanks. I just want to tell the audience we have we've got another 5 more minutes, so please do ask your questions. So we have one question, and that is from Chitra. She would like to ask, how do you manage security challenges in a hybrid implementation in a centralized environment? Are there any guidelines? Maybe first, I would like to ask this to William. We are talking about cloud security.
Sure. So I think when it comes to the hybrid itself, if I may put it in a more simpler manner, let's just minimize it to just one private, be it whether there are different components or different flavors of virtualization or even a container or Terraform inside. Let's just call it one private cloud. And we know that the private cloud is where enterprises have full control and full access to. And this will usually be what they describe as the controller. Because what we do know is that the different public clouds are not created equal. And in fact, they are based on very different frameworks, but they do have open APIs. So when we talk about there are more and more extensive and comprehensive controller, you'll find that it's important to find one that truly transcend and work across both public and private. And most enterprises would usually come to the conclusion that it's best if I put all the controller for the multi-public cloud into an environment that I have full access to. So that applies the same to the security framework as well. So there are many different technology vendors out there who already have developed all these extensive tools to start off from a private cloud controller. And as and when you're consuming and activating different services on public cloud, they are using the controller, the blueprint, the orchestration tool, and the optimization tool right from this side to control the moving parts on the public cloud. So I think there are a lot of security companies out there, and there are also a lot of them are our Equinix current alliance partners. We'll definitely be more than happy to engage in further discussions after this panel.
Thanks, William. And I've got a quick question on that before I extend it to Mohan and Kia. In terms of hybrid multi-cloud security, you mentioned the controller. Controller is really important in this sense. Are we there yet in terms of having the controller? Is this still an evolving piece that is keep in view kind of environment?
So the surprising news is that we have already been ready for quite some time. It is just that in the mad rush towards everything public cloud or 100% public cloud, these tools are often being neglected. And just like what Mohan was very accurately sharing, that the world of finance or the world of so-called finance-driven decision was swept away by the CAPEX to OPEX, and they kind of neglected the TCOs. And also, along with that, all these tools that are already available for quite some time. So, which is why the surprisingly good news is that all these controllers are already available. And in fact, they are not standing still. They are evolving themselves upwards to now to be able to even command, control, and optimize not just infrastructure, not just middleware, not just software, but even the microservices, functions, and plugins.
Okay, thanks. We have around 1 or 2 minutes. Again, if the audience have any questions, please do ask. I'd like to have some closing remarks from Kia and Mohan. First, Kia, what is the future of hybrid cloud? Do you see hybrid cloud becoming the de facto as the way companies operate?
Again, it's a business by business decision. You know, during COVID, we've seen massive growth within the public cloud environments, and that's because of their ability to scale up quickly, right? As that compute layer is required, as that ability to service the customers' needs are required, then they're scaling quickly. So I guess the short answer is yes, there is a future for hybrid cloud because every business has different needs around as they do. We talked there. Mohan gave a great use case around defence. Right, defence is not going to change to a public cloud environment, but I see definitely improvements in the utilisation of public cloud. My view, you know, I'm not a strong contender for a multi-cloud type environment in terms of public cloud. So whether people start getting focused more on going deeper into their chosen cloud provider, you know, I think that offers significant benefit. And that's certainly the strategy that we're taking, is going very, very deep and really getting in tight with a cloud native type approach. And that's where value comes for us.
Thank you. And Mohan, one last 1 minute conclusion from your side.
I think it's been an interesting discussion. I think, as I said, the hybrid will be depending upon the company, unless you are, starting new and you absolutely want to embrace the latest of everything and then jump on and become totally cloud native. That is one thing. But for traditional large organizations, hybrid in whichever form, I think will be there to stay for quite some time. I remember in 80s, people said they will not move away from mainframes and everything will be SNA and so on. And, eventually had no option but to actually embrace Unix and open systems and so on. And the concept of virtualization has been there from day zero. I have worked on VMCMS, not to reveal my age, which is when I, mainframe set and put a virtualization layer on all the mainframes operating system. And from then the world has evolved. So my, just my view, is that hybrid will be there to stay, and there will be horses for courses, multiple scenarios, particularly for large organizations which have got a footprint of Horizon 1 to Horizon 3 type applications.
Thank you. I think that's all we have in terms of time. First of all, I'd like to thank my panelists, Kier, Mohan, and William, for sharing their points of view and making this discussion lively. And if there are any other further questions, I'll say please do reach out to them privately to continue the discussion. Till then, I'll leave it back to Lachlan and to continue the afternoon program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Winston. Thanks, panelists. That was a great session on a really critical subject. So